I stepped through my parents' front door that Sunday afternoon, my 8-year-old daughter Emma and 6-year-old son Tyler, trailing behind me expecting the usual chaotic but warm family dinner. Instead, I froze in the hallway when I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen. Jessica's kids eat first and Dusty's kids wait for the crumbs. My heart shattered as I peered around the corner to see Emma and Tyler sitting in the corner, their small faces filled with confusion and hurt as they stared at empty plates, while their cousins devoured heaping portions. My sister Jessica looked directly at my children and said coldly, "Get used to it. You were born to live off what's left." My father nodded approvingly, adding, "They need to learn their place." Without a word, I grabbed my babies and left, but minutes later, everything changed forever. The drive to Maple Grove Park felt endless as Emma's quiet sobs and Tyler's sniffles filled my Honda Civic. I pulled into the empty parking lot, my hands trembling on the steering wheel as I tried to process what had just happened. This wasn't the first time I'd noticed the unequal treatment, but never had it been so blatantly cruel. "Mama, why don't Grandma and Grandpa love us anymore?" Emma's voice cracked as she wiped her nose with the sleeve of her pink sweater. The same sweater my mother had bought her for Christmas just 6 months ago, back when everything seemed normal. Tyler, still buckled in his car seat, had gone completely silent except for the occasional hiccup that followed his crying. His little fists were clenched around his stuffed dinosaur, the one my late husband had given him before the accident 2 years ago. "Sweetheart's Grandma and Grandpa do love you." I lied, hating myself for it. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and say things they don't mean. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they rang hollow. The pattern had been building for months. Missed birthday parties with weak excuses. Christmas presents that seemed like afterthoughts compared to the elaborate gifts Jessica's children received. Family photos where my kids were consistently placed in the back or cut off entirely. A sharp knock on my passenger window made me jump. Through the glass, I saw my younger brother Marcus standing there, his usually confident expression replaced with something that looked like guilt and urgency. I hadn't seen him in over 3 months, despite living only 20 minutes apart. I rolled down the window, studying his face. At 28, Marcus had always been the family mediator, the one who stayed out of drama. His appearance here now felt significant. "Dusty, we need to talk," he said, glancing nervously at the kids in the back seat. "Can you step outside for a minute?" Something in his tone made my stomach drop. I looked back at Emma and Tyler, who were watching with wide, curious eyes. "Stay right here, okay? I'll be right outside the car where you can see me." Marcus led me a few feet away, running his hands through his sandy brown hair the way he'd done since childhood when he was nervous. "I followed you here because I couldn't let you drive away without knowing the truth." "What truth?" My voice came out sharper than intended. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through what looked like text messages. "Dusty, I need to tell you something that's going to hurt, but you have to know. The way Mom and Dad have been treating Emma and Tyler, it's not random. Jessica has been feeding them lies for almost 2 years now." My legs felt suddenly weak. "What kind of lies?" Marcus held up his phone, showing me a screenshot of what appeared to be a DNA test result. The names were Emma's and Tyler's, but the listed father wasn't my late husband, David. It was some man named Robert Martinez. "This is fake," I said immediately, my voice rising. "And David is their father. I was never with anyone else. Jessica knows that." "I know it's fake," Marcus said quickly. "But Mom and Dad don't. Jessica convinced them that you had an affair while David was working those long construction shifts. She told them you were too ashamed to admit it after he died and that you've been living a lie forcing them to support illegitimate grandchildren." The parking lot seemed to spin around me. I gripped the side of my car for support. "That's impossible. Jessica was at the hospital when both kids were born. She saw how much David loved them. She knows they have his eyes, his smile. She's been very thorough." Marcus continued, his voice heavy with disgust. "She created fake hotel receipts showing you at a motel with this Robert guy. She even had someone call Mom and Dad, pretending to be him, demanding money and threatening to expose the truth unless the family paid him off." I stared at the fake DNA results on his phone screen, my mind racing. "How do you know all this?" Marcus's expression grew darker. "Last week I stopped by Jessica's house unannounced to drop off a birthday gift for my nephew. She was on the phone in her kitchen and I heard her bragging to someone about her masterpiece of deception. She was laughing Dusty, laughing about how easily she'd turned our parents against your kids. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I'd ever experienced. But why would she do this to innocent children?" because she's positioning her own kids as the sole heirs to mom and dad's estate. Marcus revealed, his voice barely above a whisper. Our parents have assets worth over $700,000, including the house and dad's retirement accounts. With your kids discredited as illegitimate, Jessica's children become the only legitimate grandchildren in line for inheritance. I looked back at my car where Emma was making funny faces to cheer up Tyler. These beautiful, innocent children who carried their father's gentle spirit and stubborn chin were being systematically destroyed by someone who should have protected them. There's more, Marcus said reluctantly. Jessica didn't just plant the evidence and walk away. She's been building this narrative for 2 years, convincing mom and dad that you're unstable, manipulative, and disrespectful of David's memory. Every time you've been excluded from family events, every time they've made excuses not to see the kids, it's been because Jessica convinced them you're a liar who's trying to take advantage of their generosity. The pieces began falling into place. The way conversations stopped when I entered rooms. The skeptical looks when I mentioned financial struggles. The way my parents had become distant and cold, treating my grief as performance rather than genuine loss. She's been intercepting some of your mail, too, Marcus added. I saw her bragging about throwing away letters addressed to you. I don't know what they were, but she seemed pleased about keeping you from receiving them. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Sorry you left so abruptly. The kids seemed hungry. Maybe next time bring snacks if you're worried about portions? The casual cruelty of it made my blood boil. She was mocking me even now, knowing I had no idea about the web of lies she'd constructed around my family. Marcus, I need proof, I said firmly. If I'm going to fight this, I need more than just your word. He nodded, pulling up a voice recording on his phone. I started recording our conversations after I figured out what she was doing. Listen to this. Jessica's voice came through the speaker clear and unmistakable. The beauty of it is that Dusty has no idea why everyone's treating her differently. She thinks it's normal family drama, but I've made her radioactive. Mom and Dad feel betrayed and disgusted by her lies about David being the father. They feel like fools for supporting her financially after he died. The recording continued with Jessica detailing how she'd slowly turned family members against me, painting me as a manipulative widow who was exploiting their grief and generosity. She described coaching her own children to be dismissive and cruel to Emma and Tyler, teaching them that their cousins weren't really family. As the recording played, I watched my children through the car window. Emma was now reading a picture book to Tyler, her small voice animated as she pointed to the colorful illustrations. They had no idea their entire world was built on quicksand, that the family they loved had been systematically turned against them through calculated lies. There's something else, Marcus said as the recording ended. Something bigger that Jessica doesn't know I found out about. Marcus looked around the empty parking lot nervously before continuing. I've been doing some digging on my own, and Jessica's plan goes deeper than just turning mom and dad against you. She's been researching David's old coworkers, trying to find someone who could believably be presented as your affair partner. He showed me a printed email thread that made my stomach turn. Jessica had contacted David's former supervisor at the construction company, asking seemingly innocent questions about which workers had been close to our family. She'd specifically inquired about men who resembled David physically and had access to our home during the renovation project we'd done 3 years ago. She found Robert Martinez, Marcus explained. He worked on your kitchen remodel. Jessica tracked him down and discovered he'd moved to Phoenix after getting divorced. Perfect candidate because he's far away and unlikely to randomly surface and contradict her story. The manipulation was breathtaking in its thoroughness. I remembered Robert vaguely, a quiet man who'd done excellent tile work and had always been respectful around my family. David had even recommended him to neighbors. The idea that Jessica would twist that innocent professional relationship into evidence of an affair made me physically sick. Look at this, Marcus continued, showing me printed screenshots of Jessica's social media research. She'd found Robert's Facebook page screenshots of his photos, even details about his work schedule during the time period she claimed the affair occurred. She knows his height, weight, hair color, everything needed to make the story believable. But the most disturbing discovery was a folder Marcus had found in Jessica's home office, labeled Timeline Documentation. Inside were handwritten notes detailing every aspect of her deception, organized by date and target audience. She started planning this immediately after David's funeral, Marcus revealed. While you were grieving and trying to figure out how to raise 2 kids alone, she was calculating how to destroy your family's reputation. The timeline showed Jessica's methodical approach. First, she'd planted seeds of doubt about my character, suggesting to our parents that I was handling David's death suspiciously well, that I seemed too eager to move on financially. Then she'd introduced the affair theory, gradually presenting it as a painful truth she'd reluctantly discovered. She even researched the timing of Emma's and Tyler's births. Marcus continued mano, making sure her fake affair timeline would align with possible conception dates. She studied their baby photos, looking for any features that didn't obviously resemble David. I thought about Emma's dark hair, which came from my side of the family, and Tyler's brown eyes, which matched my own. Features that Jessica had weaponized against innocent children. The fake DNA test wasn't her only evidence, Marcus explained. She created an entire fictional relationship between you and Robert. Fake text message conversations, edited photos, showing you together at places you'd never been, even a fabricated story about him giving you jewelry that she claimed you hid from David. The level of premeditation was staggering. While I'd been focused on healing my children's grief and maintaining stability in their lives, Jessica had been constructing an alternate reality designed to make them outcasts in their own family. She's been coaching her kids too, Marcus added reluctantly. I've heard her telling them that Emma and Tyler aren't really their cousins, that you tricked the family into thinking David was their father. She's teaching her own children to be cruel by convincing them it's justified. That explained the change in my nephew's behavior. 8-year-old Michael and 6-year-old Christopher had gone from playing happily with Emma and Tyler to treating them with cold indifference. I'd attributed it to normal childhood phases, not realizing they were being systematically turned against their cousins. The worst part is how she's used David's death against you, Marcus said, his voice filled with anger. She's convinced Mom and Dad that continuing to honor his memory while supporting his illegitimate children is disrespectful to his legacy. She's made them feel guilty for loving Emma and Tyler. I remembered my mother removing the framed photo of David from the mantel last Christmas, claiming it made the new family pictures look unbalanced. At the time, I'd thought it was just redecorating. Now I understood it was part of Jessica's campaign to erase David's presence from family gatherings. She's even recruited family friends, Marcus continued. I've heard her telling people at church that you're struggling financially because you refuse to contact the real father for child support. She's painted you as prideful and dishonest, someone who's hurting her own children by maintaining a lie. The manipulation extended beyond our immediate family. Jessica had been systematically destroying my reputation in every sphere, ensuring that even if I tried to seek support, people would already doubt my credibility. But Marcus, why are you telling me this now? I asked. You've known for a week but waited until after today's humiliation to speak up. His face reddened with shame. I've been trying to figure out how to handle it without destroying the entire family. I kept hoping Jessica would come to her senses, maybe undo some of the damage herself. But after seeing what happened today, watching Emma and Tyler's faces, he shook his head. Those kids don't deserve to suffer for adult stupidity and greed. I looked back at my children, who were now playing with Tyler's toy car on the seat between them, making quiet engine noises. Their innocence in the face of such calculated cruelty was heartbreaking. There's something else you need to know, Marcus said, his voice dropping even lower. Jessica's timeline isn't random. She's been working towards something specific, and I think I know what it is. He pulled out another document, this one official looking with legal letterhead. Grandma's will. Remember how she specifically left her house and savings to Emma and Tyler for their education? Jessica knows about that bequest, and she's been building her illegitimate children case, specifically to challenge it in court. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My grandmother had died 8 months ago, leaving her modest but valuable home and life savings to ensure my children could attend college despite losing their father so young. She'd witnessed the family favoritism firsthand and had taken steps to protect Emma and Tyler's future. The will is in probate, which gives Jessica time to build her case, Marcus explained. If she can prove to the court that Emma and Tyler aren't legitimate family members, she can contest the inheritance and likely redirect it to her own children as the only verified grandchildren. My grandmother's final act of love for my children was being used against them by someone who should have protected them. The betrayal felt complete. How much time do I have? I asked. The inheritance hearing is scheduled for next month, Marcus replied. Jessica's been coordinating with Mom and Dad to present a united family front, challenging the legitimacy of Grandma's bequest. They think they're protecting the family from your lies. Standing in that parking lot watching my innocent children play together while their own family plotted against them, I felt something shift inside me. The grief and confusion I'd been carrying transformed into determined fury. Jessica wanted a fight. She was about to get one. Marcus suggested we meet with someone who could help us understand the legal implications of Jessica's scheme. He'd been in contact with our grandmother's former lawyer, Patricia Walsh, who had been trying to reach me for months without success. She's been calling and sending letters, Marcus explained as we drove toward downtown Riverside. But Jessica has been intercepting your mail and blocking calls to your house when she visits Mom and Dad. Patricia finally contacted me when she couldn't reach you directly. The law office of Walsh and Associates occupied the second floor of a restored Victorian building on Main Street. Patricia Walsh was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She greeted us with professional warmth but underlying concern. "Is Ms. Hamilton? I've been trying to contact you since February," she said, ushering us into her office while Emma and Tyler settled in the waiting area with coloring books. "Your grandmother specifically requested that I personally oversee her bequest to your children, but there have been some troubling developments." Patricia spread several documents across her conference table. "Your grandmother left clear instructions her house on Elm Street and her savings account totaling approximately $400,000 were to be held in trust for Emma and Tyler's education. She was very specific about her reasoning. She handed me a handwritten letter in my grandmother's familiar script. Dusty's children will face challenges that Jessica's children will never know. David was a good man who died too young, leaving his babies without a father's protection. I've seen how certain family members treat these innocent children differently, and I won't let that continue after I'm gone. This money will ensure Emma and Tyler can build futures their father would be proud of." Reading my grandmother's words brought tears to my eyes. She'd recognized the unfair treatment and had taken action to protect my children even from beyond the grave. "However," Patricia continued, her expression growing serious, "your parents filed a formal challenge to the will 3 weeks ago. They're claiming the children named as beneficiaries are not legitimate family members and therefore not entitled to inherit." She showed me legal documents bearing my parents' signatures, along with an affidavit from Jessica claiming she had evidence of my extramarital affair and the children's questionable parentage. The paperwork was thorough and professionally prepared, suggesting Jessica had invested significant time and money into this legal challenge. "They've hired Blackwood and Associates to represent them," Patricia explained. "That's not a cheap firm. Someone's funding this challenge quite seriously." Marcus leaned forward. "How strong is their case legally?" "Normally not very strong," Patricia replied. "The children's birth certificates list David Hamilton as the father, and there's no existing legal challenge to his paternity. However, if they can present compelling evidence of fraud or deception, a judge might order DNA testing to verify biological relationships before releasing inheritance funds." The thought of subjecting Emma and Tyler to DNA testing as if their legitimacy were in question made my blood boil. They'd already been emotionally traumatized by their family's rejection. The idea of legal proceedings that treated them as potential fraudsters was unbearable. "But here's what's particularly concerning," Patricia continued. "I've been monitoring the estate account and there have been some unusual activities. Small withdrawals that don't match any of the authorized expenses for maintaining the property." She handed me bank statements showing monthly withdrawals of varying amounts over the past 6 months. $200 in March, $350 in April, $175 in May. The amount seemed random but added up to significant money over time. "These withdrawals require 2 signatures from the estate executors," Patricia explained. "Your parents are both listed as temporary executors until the inheritance dispute is resolved. Someone's been accessing the funds systematically." Marcus studied the statements. "Who else has access to these accounts?" "That's the problem, Patricia replied. "Your sister Jessica was added as an authorized contact for estate communications at your parents' request. She claimed she was helping them navigate the legal complexities since they're not familiar with probate procedures." The implications were clear. Jessica had positioned herself as the helpful daughter managing the complicated inheritance dispute while secretly siphoning money from the very estate she was supposedly protecting. "I've documented everything," Patricia continued, "but I needed to speak with you before taking any action. These withdrawals could constitute theft from the estate, which would be a criminal matter, not just a civil dispute. She showed me copies of withdrawal slips bearing my parents' signatures, but the handwriting looked suspicious. Having seen both of my parents sign documents throughout my life, I noticed subtle differences in the pen strokes and letter formations. I don't think my parents signed all of these, I said, pointing to several transactions. The signatures look similar, but not identical to their usual writing. Patricia nodded approvingly. I had the same suspicion. I've requested the bank provide security footage for these transaction dates, but that process takes time through legal channels. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Patricia the recordings he'd made of Jessica discussing her deception. Would this help your investigation? Patricia listened to several minutes of Jessica's recorded confessions with growing amazement. This is extraordinary evidence of fraud and conspiracy. With these recordings, we could not only defend against the inheritance challenge, but potentially file criminal charges for theft, fraud, and forgery. But what about my children's emotional well-being? I asked. They're already traumatized by their grandparents' rejection. I don't want them dragged through a legal battle that makes everything worse. Actually, Patricia said thoughtfully, resolving this quickly and decisively might be better for them psychologically. Right now, they're living with ongoing rejection and confusion. If we can prove Jessica's deception definitively, we can restore their rightful place in the family and secure their inheritance simultaneously. She outlined a strategy that would expose Jessica's entire scheme while minimizing trauma to the children. We present all evidence to your parents privately, first giving them the opportunity to withdraw their challenge and reconcile with your family before any court proceedings begin. And if they refuse to believe the evidence, I asked, then we proceed with a formal response that will likely result in criminal charges against Jessica for multiple felonies. The inheritance challenge will be dismissed, and your children will receive not only their original bequest, but potentially additional damages. Looking at the bank statements, showing months of systematic theft, I realized Jessica's greed had created the very evidence that would destroy her carefully constructed lies. Her overconfidence had led her to document her own crimes in detail. There's one more thing, Patricia added, pulling out a manila folder labeled Martinez Investigation. I took the liberty of researching this Robert Martinez person mentioned in the fraud allegations. I contacted him directly in Phoenix. My heart pounded as she opened the folder. What did he say? He was shocked and angry to learn someone was using his name in a fake affair story. He's prepared to provide testimony that he never had any personal relationship with you beyond professional tile installation work. He's also willing to take a DNA test proving he's not the father of your children. Patricia handed me a signed affidavit from Robert Martinez categorically denying any romantic or sexual relationship with me and expressing his willingness to testify in court if necessary. His statement included details about the timeline of his work on our kitchen renovation and his limited interactions with our family. So Jessica's entire story falls apart when confronted with actual facts, Marcus observed. Completely, Patricia confirmed. But what's most damaging to her case is the evidence of ongoing financial fraud. Even if she could convince people the affair story was plausible, the theft from the estate makes her motives clearly criminal rather than protective. As we prepared to leave Patricia's office, she handed me a business card for a family counselor who specialized in helping children process family trauma and betrayal. Whatever legal strategy we pursue, those children will need professional support to heal from this experience. Walking back to the car with Marcus, I felt overwhelmed by the complexity of Jessica's deception, but also empowered by the evidence we'd gathered. She'd been so focused on destroying my family that she'd overlooked the legal and financial paper trail documenting her own crimes. Dusty, what do you want to do? Marcus asked as we reached our cars. Patricia's given us options from quiet family reconciliation to full criminal prosecution. I looked through the window at Emma and Tyler, who had fallen asleep in their car seats during the long meeting. Their peaceful faces reminded me that they deserved more than just clearing their names. They deserved justice for the emotional trauma they'd endured and security for their futures. I want to give Jessica one chance to confess and make this right, I decided. But if she doubles down on her lies, we expose everything and let her face the consequences. Marcus nodded approvingly, and Mom and Dad, they're victims of Jessica's manipulation too, but they chose to treat innocent children cruelly based on lies they never bothered to verify. They need to understand the damage they've caused and take responsibility for rebuilding their relationship with Emma and Tyler. As I drove home that evening, I realized this wasn't just about money or family dynamics anymore. Jessica's scheme had forced me to become the advocate and protector my children needed, even if it meant destroying relationships I'd hoped to preserve. Sometimes love requires fighting back against injustice, even when the perpetrators are family members who should have known better. The next morning brought a harsh reminder of how deeply Jessica's lies had affected my children. I found Emma awake before dawn, sitting on her bedroom floor with a composition notebook open in front of her, writing furiously with a purple crayon. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" I asked, settling beside her on the carpet. She looked up with eyes that seemed far too old for her 8 years. "I'm writing letters to Daddy. I want to ask him why his family doesn't love us anymore, but I can't mail them because he's in heaven." My heart shattered as she showed me pages filled with her careful cursive handwriting. "Dear Daddy, why did Grandma say mean things about me and Tyler yesterday? Did we do something wrong? I try to be good, but they don't smile at us anymore. Are we bad kids?" Another page read, "Dear Daddy, I heard Aunt Jessica tell her kids that we're not really family. What does that mean? You said family is forever, but maybe you were wrong. I miss you and wish you could fix this." I held Emma close as she continued writing, her small hand gripping the crayon with determined intensity. "Mama, does Daddy know what's happening to us? Can he see that his family is being mean?" Before I could answer, Tyler appeared in the doorway, clutching his stuffed dinosaur and dragging a pillowcase behind him. When I looked closer, I realized the pillowcase was full of something heavy. "Tyler, what's in there?" I asked gently. He hesitated, then dumped the contents onto Emma's bedroom floor. Crackers, granola bars, apple slices in plastic bags, even a sandwich from yesterday's lunch at school. He'd been hoarding food like a scared animal. "I saved these in case there's not enough food next time," he whispered. "At Grandma's house, they said we have to wait for leftovers, so I thought maybe we should bring our own food so we don't go hungry." The sight of my 6-year-old son stockpiling food because he'd learned not to trust his own family's provision broke something inside me. These children had been living in survival mode, adapting to emotional starvation by any means necessary. "Tyler, baby, you don't have to save food," I said, fighting back tears. "Mama will always make sure you have enough to eat." "But what if Grandma says no again?" he asked. "What if she tells us we're not allowed to eat with the real grandkids?" Emma looked up from her letter, writing, "Mama, are we adopted? Is that why Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Jessica treat us different because we're not really family?" The questions were devastating because they showed how intelligently my children had been trying to make sense of the inexplicable cruelty they'd experienced. They'd created logical explanations for illogical behavior, blaming themselves rather than recognizing the adult manipulation destroying their sense of security. "You are absolutely, completely, 100% family," I said firmly. "You are Daddy's children and nothing will ever change that. Some people are confused about things right now, but that's not your fault and it's not true." Later that morning, while I was on a work call, Emma made a decision that would change everything. Without asking permission, she picked up my phone and called her grandparents directly. I discovered this when I found her crying in the kitchen, having recorded the entire conversation. "I need to hear what they said," I told her gently. "Can you play it for me?" Emma's small voice came through the phone speaker. "Grandpa, it's Emma. I wanted to ask you something important. Why don't you and Grandma love me and Tyler anymore? Did we do something bad?" My father's voice was uncomfortable but telling. "Emma, sweetheart, it's complicated. There are things about your family situation that your mama hasn't been honest about." "What do you mean?" Emma asked with heartbreaking innocence. "Well, your Aunt Jessica told us some things about your real daddy, and we're just trying to protect our family from getting hurt again." "But my daddy is David Hamilton," Emma said confidently. "He used to read me stories and teach me how to ride my bike. He's in all our pictures." There was a long pause before my father continued. "Emma, I think your mama needs to tell you the truth about some things. We love you, but we have to be careful about how we handle your situation." "What situation?" Emma pressed. "I don't understand what you're talking about." My mother's voice joined the conversation. "Emma, honey, you're too young to understand grown-up problems. Just know that we're trying to do what's best for everyone in the family. But Tyler cries every night because he thinks you don't want us anymore," Emma said, her voice breaking. "And I've been good at school and eating all my vegetables, but you still don't invite us to dinner or want to play games with us." It's not about being good or bad, my mother replied, but her tone suggested discomfort with the conversation. It's about protecting the family from people who haven't been truthful. The recording ended with Emma asking one final devastating question. If I prove I'm good enough, will you love me again? Neither of my parents answered directly, instead telling her they loved her, but needed to talk to me about adult matters before things could get better. After listening to the entire conversation, I realized Emma had unknowingly obtained crucial evidence. My parents had explicitly confirmed that their treatment was based on information from Jessica about the children's real daddy, and had admitted they were withholding love pending resolution of some unspecified family truthfulness issue. Emma, you were very brave to make that call, I told her. And you helped Mama understand exactly what's been happening in our family. Did I get in trouble for calling without asking? She worried. No, sweetheart. You did something very important. You asked honest questions that deserved honest answers. That afternoon, Tyler's behavior provided another shock. I found him in his bedroom carefully cutting up one of his favorite photos with child-safe scissors. The picture showed him and David at a baseball game, both of them grinning and wearing matching team caps. Tyler, why are you cutting up your picture with Daddy? I asked, sitting on his bed. If Daddy isn't my real daddy like everyone says, then maybe I shouldn't keep his pictures. Tyler replied matter-of-factly. Aunt Jessica says we're living a lie, so maybe I should throw away the lie pictures? I gently took the scissors and the damaged photograph. Tyler, Daddy is absolutely your real father. The people saying different things are wrong, and Mama is going to fix this problem very soon. How do you know for sure? He asked with 6-year-old logic. Aunt Jessica showed us papers with our names on them that said different things. The realization that Jessica had shown fake DNA results to my children directly made my blood boil. She'd traumatized them not just through exclusion, but through deliberate presentation of fraudulent evidence designed to destroy their sense of identity. Tyler, remember how you have Daddy's brown eyes and Emma has his stubborn chin. Remember how he used to sing the dinosaur song with you and how he taught Emma to whistle? Those are things that daddies share with their real children. But Aunt Jessica says those things don't matter, Tyler persisted. She says papers from doctors matter more than songs and games. That evening, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. I called Patricia Walsh and told her about the children's recorded conversation with their grandparents and Jessica's direct manipulation of Emma and Tyler. This changes our strategy significantly, Patricia said. Showing fraudulent DNA results to minor children could constitute child emotional abuse under state law. We're no longer just dealing with inheritance fraud, but potential criminal charges related to child welfare. I want this to end, I told her firmly. I want my children to feel safe and loved in their own family, and I want Jessica to face consequences for what she's done to innocent kids. Then we move to the confrontation phase, Patricia replied. We present all evidence to your parents and Jessica simultaneously with witnesses present and give them one opportunity to confess and make amends before we pursue legal remedies. As I tucked Emma and Tyler into bed that night, Emma asked one more question that broke my heart. Mama, if we prove we're really Daddy's kids, will Grandma and Grandpa have space for us at the dinner table again? Yes, baby, I promised. And they're going to apologize for making you feel unwelcome in your own family? Looking at my children's faces, I knew I was fighting not just for money or vindication, but for their fundamental right to feel secure and loved by their extended family. Jessica's lies had stolen their sense of belonging, but I was going to get it back for them whatever the cost. The next morning brought an unexpected phone call that would provide the final pieces of evidence I needed. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, a familiar male voice said, Dusty, this is Brian Matthews, Jessica's husband. I need to speak with you urgently about what my wife has been doing to your family. Brian suggested we meet at a coffee shop across town away from any family members who might see us together. He sounded nervous but determined, and I agreed to meet him that afternoon while the kids were at school. Riverside Coffee Company was nearly empty at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. Brian was already seated in a corner booth when I arrived, looking haggard and stressed. At 35, he'd always been the quiet, steady presence in Jessica's life, the accountant who balanced her dramatic personality with calm rationality. Today, he looked like a man carrying a terrible burden. I want you to know that I had no idea about the extent of Jessica's lies until recently, He began immediately. I knew she was upset about your grandmother's will and felt like your children were getting preferential treatment, but I never imagined she'd create an elaborate fraud to destroy your family. He pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. I've been documenting everything since I discovered what she was doing. I'm filing for divorce and I want to make sure she faces full consequences for what she's put your children through. The first document was a bank statement from their joint checking account showing payments to someone named Derek Morrison for research and documentation services. The amounts were significant: $1,500 in March 2000 in April, another $1,000 in May. Derek is the guy Jessica hired to create the fake evidence, Brian explained. He's some kind of freelance investigator who specializes in manufacturing documentation for people going through messy divorces. Jessica found him through an online forum for women seeking revenge on unfaithful husbands. The irony was staggering. Jessica had used resources designed to help genuine victims of infidelity to create fictional evidence of an affair that never happened. She's been obsessed with this plan for over a year, Brian continued. She has files in our home office dedicated to tracking your family's activities, your financial situation, even your children's school schedules. She knows when Emma has soccer practice and when Tyler goes to speech therapy. He showed me printed screenshots of social media posts I'd made about the kids' activities with Jessica's handwritten notes in the margins, calculating the best times to create coincidental encounters that would allow her to gather more information. Brian, why didn't you stop her sooner? I asked, though I tried to keep judgment out of my voice. His face reddened with shame. I thought it was just venting and fantasy at first. Jessica has always been dramatic and competitive with you. When she started talking about proving the kids weren't David's, I assumed it was just angry speculation that she'd eventually drop. When did you realize it was serious? 2 months ago, I found the fake DNA test results she'd had created. She was practicing how to present them to your parents, rehearsing her emotional revelation speech. That's when I understood she was actually going through with this insane plan. Brian's folder contained Jessica's detailed timeline for implementing her deception, complete with target dates for each phase of manipulation. She'd planned everything from the initial seeds of doubt to the final inheritance challenge with the precision of a military campaign. She's been coaching our kids too, Brian admitted reluctantly. I've heard her telling Michael and Christopher that Emma and Tyler aren't their real cousins, that they need to be careful not to get too attached because your family might be removed from holiday celebrations once the truth comes out. The damage to Jessica's own children was another layer of cruelty I hadn't fully considered. Michael and Christopher were being taught to view their cousins as temporary fixtures in their lives, conditional family members whose presence depended on adult drama they couldn't understand. There's something else, Brian said, lowering his voice even further. Jessica has been stealing money from our kids' college funds to pay for this scheme. The payments to Derek, the legal consultation fees, even the private investigator she hired to research David's employment history. She's spent over $8,000 of our children's educational savings to fund her campaign against your family. The bank statements documented systematic withdrawals from accounts labeled Michael College Fund and Christopher College Fund, money that was supposed to secure Brian's children's futures, but had instead financed their mother's vendetta. I confronted her about the missing money last week and she exploded, Brian continued. She said destroying your family was more important than college savings because once she secured the inheritance money for our kids, they'd have more than enough for education. He pulled out his phone and played a recording he'd made during that argument. Jessica's voice was clear and furious. Brian, you don't understand the bigger picture. If I can prove those brats aren't legitimate family members, our kids become the sole heirs to almost $1 million in combined assets from the grandparents, plus the grandmother's bequest. $8,000 invested now will return hundreds of thousands later. The recording continued with Jessica detailing her financial calculations, treating the destruction of my children's family relationships as a profitable investment strategy. She's completely lost perspective, Brian said after the recording ended. She talks about Emma and Tyler like they're obstacles to be removed rather than innocent children. She's convinced herself that she's protecting our family from your deception. But she's the one deceiving everyone. I thought about my children's confusion and pain the way they'd started questioning their own identity and worth. Brian, has she said anything about what she expects to happen to Emma and Tyler after she destroys their family relationships? His expression grew even more troubled. She thinks once your parents withdraw their support and the inheritance money is redirected, you'll be forced to move away from Riverside. She wants your children completely removed from family gatherings and holidays. She's planning to tell our kids that their cousins had to leave because their mama was dishonest with everyone. The calculated cruelty took my breath away. Jessica wasn't just stealing money, she was engineering the complete exile of 2 innocent children from their extended family and community. There's more evidence, Brian said, pulling out what appeared to be email printouts. Jessica has been corresponding with a lawyer about filing false child welfare reports against you. She wants to claim you're psychologically abusing Emma and Tyler by forcing them to maintain relationships with a family that supposedly knows they're illegitimate. The emails showed Jessica researching how to weaponize the Child Protective Services system against me using her own lies as the basis for claims that I was harming my children by not acknowledging their true paternity. She's also been planning to approach Emma and Tyler's school counselor with concerns about their emotional well-being, Brian added. She wants to plant the idea that they're struggling because they're living a lie about their father's identity. I realized Jessica's plan extended far beyond family dynamics and inheritance money. She was systematically working to isolate my children from every support system in their lives, using institutions designed to protect children as weapons against them. Brian, I need to ask you something directly, I said. Are you willing to testify about all of this in court if necessary? Absolutely, he replied without hesitation. I've already contacted a lawyer about protecting my own children from Jessica's vindictive behavior. Our marriage is over and I want full custody to keep Michael and Christopher away from her toxic influence. He handed me a business card for his attorney. David Chen specializes in custody cases involving parental alienation and psychological abuse. He said Jessica's behavior toward your children could actually impact her custody rights with our kids, because it demonstrates a pattern of using children as pawns in adult conflicts. As we prepared to leave the coffee shop, Brian made one final revelation that shocked me. There's someone else who's been helping with evidence gathering. Your family priest, Father Rodriguez, contacted me after Jessica tried to recruit him to support her version of events. What do you mean? She approached Father Rodriguez 2 weeks ago, claiming she had painful information about your family that she needed spiritual guidance to handle. She wanted him to publicly validate her concerns about the children's legitimacy during Sunday announcements or counseling sessions. Brian showed me a text message from Father Rodriguez. Brian, I need to speak with you about your wife's request for church support in her family dispute. I recorded our conversation for documentation purposes. This is a serious matter that requires intervention. Father Rodriguez realized Jessica was asking him to help spread lies that would hurt innocent children, Brian explained. He's prepared to provide testimony about her attempted manipulation of religious authority to legitimize her deception. Walking back to my car, I felt overwhelmed by the mountain of evidence against Jessica, but also empowered by the number of people who were willing to stand up for my children's well-being. Her overreaching had created a network of witnesses to her own deception. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Patricia wants to meet tomorrow to finalize our confrontation strategy. Are you ready to face Jessica and Mom and Dad with all the evidence? I typed back, more than ready. It's time to end this and get my children's family back. That night, as I watched Emma and Tyler playing together in our living room, building an elaborate castle with blocks, I realized they had no idea that tomorrow would determine whether they'd be welcomed back into their extended family or permanently exiled from it. Their innocent laughter reminded me why this fight was worth every difficult conversation and painful revelation ahead. Jessica wanted to play games with children's lives. Tomorrow she'd learn the consequences of targeting the wrong family. Patricia Walsh had arranged for us to meet at her law office rather than my parents' house, creating a neutral environment where emotions could be managed and evidence could be presented systematically. I'd arranged for Emma and Tyler to stay with my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, not wanting them to witness what was about to unfold. The conference room felt tense as everyone arrived. My parents looked confused and defensive, clearly uncertain why they'd been summoned to a lawyer's office for what they'd been told was a family discussion. Jessica walked in with her usual confidence, carrying a leather portfolio that I assumed contained her fabricated evidence. Marcus had positioned himself near the door while Brian sat across the table looking pale but determined. Before we begin, Patricia announced, I want everyone to understand that this meeting is being recorded with the consent of all parties, and that anything discussed here may be used in subsequent legal proceedings. Jessica's confidence flickered slightly, but she recovered quickly. I'm not sure why we need lawyers for a family inheritance discussion, but I'm prepared to present evidence that will clarify the situation regarding Dusty's children's legitimacy. Actually, Patricia replied calmly, we're here to discuss evidence of fraud, theft, and child emotional abuse that has been perpetrated against this family. Dusty, would you like to begin? I looked directly at my parents, who appeared genuinely confused. Mom, Dad, for the past 2 years, you've been treating Emma and Tyler differently because someone convinced you that David wasn't their father and that I'd been lying to the family about their paternity. I want you to hear the truth about where that information came from. Sakuas. Jessica immediately interrupted. Dusty, I understand you're upset about the inheritance situation, but denying documented evidence won't change the facts about your children's parentage. What documented evidence? I asked, pulling out the folder Patricia had prepared. You mean these fake DNA test results that were created by Derek Morrison, a freelance fraud specialist who manufactures false documentation for divorce cases? I placed the real DNA test results on the table, the ones Patricia had arranged, through a legitimate laboratory. Emma and Tyler's genetic markers clearly matched David's DNA sample from the medical records we'd obtained from his doctor. These are the actual DNA test results proving David Hamilton is the biological father of both children, I continued. The documents you showed my parents were fabricated, paid for with money stolen from your own children's college funds. My father picked up the real test results, studying them carefully. Jessica, what is she talking about? You showed us different test results that said something completely different. Jessica's face had gone pale, but she maintained her composure. Those documents could be fake just as easily. Anyone can create false paperwork if they're desperate enough. You're right, I agreed. Anyone can create false paperwork, including fake hotel receipts, fabricated text message conversations, and phony witness statements. Marcus activated a recording device on the table, and Jessica's own voice filled the room. The beauty of it is that Dusty has no idea why everyone's treating her differently. She thinks it's normal family drama, but I've made her radioactive. Mom and Dad feel betrayed and disgusted by her lies about David being the father. My mother gasped as she recognized Jessica's voice detailing her manipulation strategy. The recording continued with Jessica bragging about turning family members against me and coaching her children to be cruel to Emma and Tyler. Jessica, my father said, his voice shaking with anger, is this you talking about destroying your sister's family? Before Jessica could answer, Brian spoke up. Dad Hamilton, I need to show you something else. He placed bank statements on the table showing the systematic theft from our grandmother's estate account. Jessica has been forging your signatures to steal money from the inheritance that was meant for Emma and Tyler's education. She's taken almost $6,000 over the past 6 months. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Financial records recorded confessions testimony from multiple witnesses and proof of Jessica's collaboration with professional fraud specialists. My parents stared at the documents in stunned silence. There's more, I continued. Jessica approached Father Rodriguez at our church, trying to recruit him to publicly support her lies about my children. She wanted religious authority to validate her deception. As if summoned by providence, Father Rodriguez knocked on the conference room door. Patricia had invited him to provide his testimony in person. The elderly priest entered with solemn dignity and placed a small recording device on the table. Jessica Matthews approached me 2 weeks ago. He began his accented English carrying the weight of moral authority. She asked me to make announcements during Sunday service that would support her claims about the Hamilton children's parentage. When I refused, she offered to make a substantial donation to the church in exchange for my cooperation. The recording of Jessica's attempted bribery played for everyone to hear. Her voice was desperate and calculating as she tried to convince Father Rodriguez to betray his ethical obligations in service of her deception. She wanted me to tell the congregation that I had spiritual concerns about the children's legitimacy. Father Rodriguez continued, she asked me to suggest during counseling sessions that the family was living in deception that needed to be corrected. My mother had begun crying quietly. Jessica, how could you do this to innocent children? How could you ask a priest to lie for you? Jessica finally lost her composure. You don't understand, she shouted. Dusty has always been the favorite. Even after David died, she got all the attention, all the sympathy, all the help with her kids. My children have been ignored while everyone focused on the tragic widow and her poor orphaned babies. Her true motives were finally emerging. This wasn't about protecting the family from deception. It was about jealousy and competition that had festered into destructive obsession. I worked for 2 years to prove that she wasn't the saint everyone believed. Jessica continued, Neil, I knew if I could show she'd been lying about something important, people would finally see her the way I do. But she wasn't lying, my father said quietly. The children are David's. The DNA proves it. You created false evidence to destroy your own family. Brian placed the final piece of evidence on the table bank statements, showing Jessica's payments to Derek Morrison for documentation services, and email correspondence detailing her requests for specific types of fraudulent evidence. She spent over $8,000 of our children's college money to pay for fake DNA tests, forged hotel receipts, and fabricated witness statements, Brian explained. She researched David's co-workers to find someone who could plausibly be presented as Dusty's affair partner, then built an entire fictional relationship around a man who barely knew their family. The room fell silent except for my mother's quiet sobbing. The magnitude of Jessica's deception was finally clear to everyone. Jessica, Patricia said formally, based on the evidence presented here, you could face criminal charges for fraud, theft, forgery, mail interception, and child emotional abuse. The district attorney's office has been briefed on this case and is prepared to proceed with prosecution. Jessica's defiance crumbled. I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted people to see that Dusty wasn't perfect, that she didn't deserve all the special treatment and sympathy. You destroyed innocent children's sense of security and belonging because you were jealous of their mother, Father Rodriguez said sternly. You used the house of God to legitimize lies that hurt the most vulnerable members of your family. My parents looked devastated as they processed the full scope of Jessica's manipulation. 2 years of treating their grandchildren with suspicion and coldness, based entirely on elaborate lies designed to feed one daughter's jealousy of another. Dusty. My father said, his voice broken. We have failed Emma and Tyler terribly. We allowed ourselves to be convinced that innocent children were somehow fraudulent. We treated them cruelly, based on lies we never properly investigated. The question now, Patricia interjected, is how we move forward. Jessica faces potential felony charges that could result in prison time. The estate theft must be repaid immediately, and this family needs to decide whether reconciliation is possible after such profound betrayal. Jessica looked around the room at the faces of people she'd manipulated and lied to for 2 years. Her elaborate scheme had collapsed, completely exposing not just her deception, but the ugliness of her motives. I'll pay back the money, she whispered. I'll confess everything to Emma and Tyler. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. But I realized that some damage couldn't be undone with simple apologies. My children had spent 2 years believing their own family considered them illegitimate and unwelcome. The scars from that rejection would take time and professional help to heal. Jessica, I said quietly, you didn't just steal money or lie to adults. You looked at 2 innocent children who had already lost their father and decided to take away their family too. That kind of cruelty doesn't get fixed with apologies. The meeting ended with clear consequences. Jessica would face criminal prosecution, pay full restitution, plus damages, and have no unsupervised contact with Emma and Tyler pending completion of court-ordered psychological evaluation and treatment. My parents committed to family counseling and making amends to my children for the trauma they'd endured. As everyone filed out of the conference room, I felt both victorious and exhausted. Justice was being served, but the work of healing my children's hearts was just beginning. 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our grandmother's house on Elm Street watching Emma and Tyler help their grandfather paint the fence in the backyard. The inheritance had been fully restored, the legal challenges dismissed, and Jessica had pled guilty to multiple felony charges resulting in 18 months in prison plus 5 years probation. The transformation in my children was remarkable. Emma's nightmares had stopped after 6 weeks of family therapy, and Tyler had gradually stopped hoarding food once he felt secure that family gatherings would include him. Their relationship with their grandparents was slowly rebuilding, though it required ongoing counseling and careful attention to rebuilding trust. Mama, look, Tyler called from the yard. Grandpa taught me how to paint without dripping. My father waved from where he was crouched beside Tyler, patiently guiding his small hands as they worked on the fence together. The scene was both heartwarming and heartbreaking, a glimpse of the relationship they could have had all along, if not for Jessica's interference. My mother appeared in the kitchen doorway carrying a plate of sandwiches for the workers outside. Emma asked if she could invite her friend Sophia over for dinner tonight. I told her, of course, that this is her house too now. The casual mention of Haikis, her house, reflected the new reality. The inheritance money had been placed in educational trusts for both children, and our grandmother's house had become a weekend retreat where they could build positive memories with their extended family. How are they doing with the counseling sessions? My mother asked, setting down the sandwiches. Better each week, I replied. Dr. Martinez says they're processing the betrayal in age-appropriate ways. Emma understands that some adults make very bad choices that hurt children, and Tyler is learning to trust that family relationships can be repaired when people work hard to fix their mistakes. The family therapy sessions had been challenging but transformative for everyone involved. My parents faced the difficult reality that they'd chosen to believe lies rather than investigate claims about their grandchildren. Marcus dealt with guilt about not speaking up sooner when he first suspected Jessica's manipulation. Brian called yesterday, my mother mentioned. He wanted to thank us again for supporting his custody case. The judge awarded him full custody of Michael and Christopher. Jessica's conviction for fraud and child emotional abuse had significantly impacted her parental rights. The boys were now living with Brian, full-time attending therapy to process their mother's manipulation and rebuild their relationships with Emma and Tyler. How are the boys adjusting, I asked. It's hard for them, my mother admitted. They're confused about why their mama is in jail and why they were taught to be mean to their cousins. But they seem relieved not to be carrying secrets anymore. The extended family healing process included Jessica's children, who had been innocent victims of their mother's toxic behavior. Family sessions helped them understand that they'd been manipulated into cruelty and that their relationships with Emma and Tyler could be rebuilt on honest foundations. Father Rodriguez had also played a crucial role in the family's recovery. Sunday services now included prayers for families dealing with deception and betrayal, and he'd established a support group for children affected by adult manipulation. Emma and Tyler participated in age-appropriate activities that helped them process their experiences alongside other kids who'd faced similar challenges. Dusty, I need to say something, my mother said, sitting down at the kitchen table. I've been thinking about this for months, and I need you to hear it directly. I joined her at the table, noting the serious tone in her voice. Your father and I failed as grandparents and as human beings, she continued. We allowed jealousy and manipulation to poison our love for innocent children. We treated Emma and Tyler as guilty until proven innocent, when we should have protected them from anyone who threatened their sense of belonging. Her voice broke slightly. I keep thinking about Tyler hiding food because he'd learned not to trust family gatherings to provide for him. That little boy was afraid of going hungry at his own grandparents' house because we made him feel unwelcome. The ongoing conversations about accountability and repair had been difficult but necessary. My parents couldn't undo 2 years of rejection and suspicion, but they could take responsibility for their choices and work actively to rebuild trust. What helps me move forward, I replied, is seeing how you're showing up for them now. Emma told me yesterday that Grandpa helped her with her math homework and that Grandma's teaching her to make cookies. Those are the memories that will heal the hurt ones. Through the window, I watched Emma demonstrate her painting technique to her grandfather, both of them laughing when she accidentally painted a streak across her own cheek. The comfortable interaction showed how much progress they'd made in rebuilding their relationship. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Walsh. Restitution payment received in full. Jessica paid additional damages as agreed. Estate matter officially closed. The financial aspects of Jessica's crimes had been resolved completely. She'd paid back all stolen money plus damages for emotional distress, legal costs, and therapy expenses for all affected children. The bankruptcy of her assets to cover restitution meant she'd face long-term financial consequences for her choices. There's something else I want to tell you, my mother continued. Your father and I have rewritten our own wills to ensure Emma and Tyler are specifically protected from any future challenges to their inheritance rights. We never want them to question their place in this family again. The legal documents now explicitly recognized Emma and Tyler as beloved grandchildren, with full inheritance rights, including protective language that would prevent anyone from challenging their legitimacy in the future. That evening, we gathered for dinner at the restored family table with all children treated equally, and Jessica's empty chair serving as a reminder of the consequences of choosing deception over truth. Emma sat between her grandparents, chattering about her upcoming school play, while Tyler proudly showed off the painted fence through the dining room window. "Mama," Emma said as we drove home later, "I'm glad we fought back against the lies. It was scary for a while, but now everyone knows the truth." "What did you learn from everything that happened?" I asked. "That families should protect each other, not hurt each other," she replied thoughtfully. "And that sometimes you have to be brave and stand up to people who are being mean, even if they're supposed to love you." Tyler added from his car seat, "And that daddy really is our daddy, even though some people tried to say he wasn't. The truth always wins if you're strong enough to fight for it." Their resilience and wisdom continued to amaze me. They'd processed the complex adult betrayal and emerged with their sense of self and family intact stronger for having learned that love requires action and protection, not just words. 6 months after the confrontation, Jessica was released early for good behavior and mandatory counseling. She'd written letters to Emma and Tyler apologizing for her actions, though I'd decided they weren't ready to process direct communication from her yet. Her relationship with her own children remained supervised and conditional on continued therapy and demonstrated behavior change. The family had found a new equilibrium based on honesty, accountability, and commitment to protecting the most vulnerable members from adult dysfunction. Sunday dinners were joyful celebrations where all children felt equally welcome and valued. Standing in my kitchen one evening, watching Emma help Tyler with his homework, while their grandfather read stories in our living room, I realized we'd gained something more valuable than money or vindication. We'd learned that love without courage is insufficient to protect family bonds, and that sometimes fighting back against injustice is the most loving thing you can do. My children now understood that they were worthy of protection and that their place in the family was secure, regardless of anyone else's jealousy or manipulation. They'd learned to distinguish between people who genuinely loved them and those who would exploit their vulnerability for personal gain. The most important lesson wasn't about Jessica's punishment or even about family reconciliation. It was about the power of truth combined with courage to overcome deception, and about the responsibility every adult has to protect children from the consequences of grown-up failures and cruelties. Emma and Tyler would carry scars from their experience, but they'd also carry strength. They knew their father's love lived on through them, that their family relationships were built on truth rather than lies, and that someone would always fight for their right to feel secure and valued. As I tucked them into bed that night, Emma asked, "Mama, do you think other kids have families that tell lies about them?" "Sometimes," I replied honestly. "But the important thing is that when lies hurt children, there are always adults who will fight to protect them and tell the truth." "And the truth always wins?" Tyler asked. "The truth wins when people are brave enough to stand up for it," I answered, "just like we did." What would you do if you discovered someone in your family had been systematically lying to destroy your children's sense of belonging? Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and protecting innocent family members from manipulation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this story if it moved you. Please subscribe for more stories about families overcoming betrayal and finding healing through courage and truth. Share this with anyone who needs to remember that standing up for children is always worth the fight. Thank you for joining me in this journey of pain, discovery, and ultimately justice. May you always have the strength to protect the innocent and the wisdom to choose truth over comfortable lies.